Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I'm H.A. Conrad, coming to you from Brooklyn, along with my intrepid co-host, who is on the opposite side of these here United States, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hello, H.A.
How are you feeling this fine day?
Thanks for letting me come back on the show. I really appreciate the invitation.
We all know the show's about you, please. Anyway, so today we got a couple of zombie news, nothing too crazy. And then we're going to be talking about Fear the Walking Dead, episode 10. I mean, you know, it's the one entitled Handle with Care. And I will say, you know, I think last week's episode of Fear the Walking Dead was the pinnacle of horrible, but this one is close. So...
Oof. Well, okay, on that note, before we even get into the news, like every so often I think about what we're saying on the show and I compare it to what other people are saying critically, and we're not in the same ballpark as, you know, people who get paid to do this, clearly. But other people actually thought last week was good.
Well, those people are wrong. They are totally wrong.
Including the master skeptic himself, Eric Kane, who I know we talk about way too much on the show, but he's one of the only people who reliably and regularly writes about Fear the Walking Dead and The Walking Dead. And usually he's like, yeah, this is all garbage. And then last week he's like, yeah, this was okay.
Really? Because
so I don't even know what to think anymore.
I think that they are all wrong and we are right. So that is what I'm going to say. I am totally fine with certain differing opinions, and I can get behind, I can see how a person thinks that. No, last week's episode was complete and utter garbage and an absolute terrible, terrible thing to have even been created. Anyway.
Wow, tell them how you really feel.
I am totally going to do that. I just can't hold back on this one. Sorry.
Yeah.
But in any case, so in news today, I mean, the interesting thing, and I'm sure you have seen this, but basically, at least in New York, all appointments for vaccines are now walk-in. You don't need to necessarily make an appointment. You can still do that, but there's enough vaccine available that people can just walk in and get appointments. It seems like it's wild. It's a little concerning, though, and I hear that this is the same in a lot of states now, but the worry is that we're not going to hit the 70% vaccination rate that you need for herd immunity.
So they're just trying to make it as easy as possible.
Right. So that's part of it. But also the demand for the vaccines is down, which is a little concerning because I guess at least here, I mean, New York City itself is now over 50% vaccinated. Over 50% of people have gotten their first shot, at least. And I think it's hovering around like the 35, 40 overall. And it varies by neighborhood. Our neighborhood is actually, as I mentioned before, we were like at the higher end of vaccination rates early, which, you know, hey, it's an affluent and nerdy neighborhood, so I'm not shocked to hear that that's the case. But, you know, I think that the concern is that all around the country, it's like you don't want people to stop getting the vaccine. And I do think that, unfortunately, I think some of it, people who were a little leery of it, you know, saw the news about J&J and AstraZeneca, God. And then I do think that has maybe tamped down a little bit of the...
maybe.
A lot,
I think that's
a lot.
For
I know,
sure that was a huge issue. And
so it's and they are now they're now sort of allowing them to be distributing these shots again, but it's concerning, and I just honestly, like, I am so exhausted about this whole issue, quite frankly, and I just want everything to be better, and it just worries me that we're not going to get there, and more so the news from around the world to me is a lot more concerning.
India is
a big rough spot, and I truly think that the other countries who do have the vaccine available should start shipping and getting that, and just have a worldwide effort. Right now, the cases are spiking, and interestingly, in Thailand, they have like kind of a tiered system. So they are running out of beds for people in general. Like, they have like kind of a generalized healthcare system, but you can always pay more and be put in a hospital, which is basically a hotel hospital.
Oh boy.
And it's, I think, around $400 a night or something like that. But the Thai South, like that is out of range for most people who live in Thailand, right? So it's really concerning just in terms of the differences in how people are being treated, and it's horrible.
Mm.
The economic disparity. India is beyond terrifying what's happening. So it's not just the fact that they have the numbers spiking and that they have the very low vaccination rates and availability of vaccines. It's also the variants that they're seeing there are very different and more than they are seen in other places. And so a lot of countries are actually saying they're shutting down their borders to anybody from India. And so that's if you look at the numbers, they're horrifying.
That's
So
just also this whole shutting down the borders thing.
it
I
doesn't
think
work.
if we learned anything from this time last year when all the borders were getting shut, it's that it's already there, guys.
Right. And I also saw another news piece about Japan's numbers, which are now going up again. Their numbers have never been as bad as in other places. And in fact, they had done a very good job in terms of, keeping things under control, but they are now spiking again, at least from, in terms of the numbers that they had been seeing. And again, Japan has not secured a ton of vaccines. So the vaccination rates are low there. So that's, it's concerning to see these things happening, and the things that are in common are low vaccination rates and availability of vaccines. So I do feel like there needs to be more of a world effort to make sure, because it really isn't just one, you know what I mean? Like it's not, we're all in this together, like everything affects each other. So really, I really hope that some like coordinated effort to help get this under control, so we're not dealing with this forever. Like this is just horrible. So anyway, in Canada, we already talked about Canada. Canada can't produce vaccines. They're trying to like put plants in place, but those things won't be up and running until the end of the year. I feel fortunate that myself and my loved ones have been able to get it so far, but I really am concerned overall for the situation long term. So we shall see. But let's switch into some lighter fare.
Yeah.
In our zombie entertainment news, there is a zombie comedy in the works, and this is I think it's going to be on Amazon, correct?
Yep, that's the deal.
Yep.
Amazon Studios will be producing Killing It, a zombie action comedy feature, which I believe is another word for a movie.
Right.
With the headlining star Robin Thede, who don't know that I've ever heard of, but has done stuff.
I have heard of Robin, though I admit I don't remember seeing anything, because I saw the sort of list of things, but I have heard that she's a pretty incredible writer and actor. So this would be kind of cool. I can't wait for this to come out. And I've been really enjoying some of the Amazon projects. So this is definitely something I think we should check out. They describe it as sort of a Shaun of the Dead / like girls or road trip or something like that, which could be kind of fun.
And I guess Robin Thede is not the star; she is the writer and producer. So
okay,
that
so
makes more
much
sense.
More sense.
That
yep.
she is she's going to be the power.
Yep.
And it'll be interesting to see how this comes together. This is in Variety, so this is super early days, and sometimes these projects never see the light of day, but I hope they do.
I hope this one does. And usually when you see it announced that Amazon signed on, typically they do at least, So I feel like this is probably going to go, but there maybe the timing, and maybe because of COVID reasons, maybe the timing of the production is a little delayed. So we'll see. But we'll keep an eye out on that one. There is, of course, more and more articles coming out about Army of the Dead. Some of them very funny. There was one about Tig Navarro basically being like, I don't understand why people think my 2 seconds on screen were so sexy, but as Stuart, you pointed out, throw in aviators and, some kind of rugged army gear, and anybody can look really but her reaction to it was seriously funny. Personally, I love her, and I think that she's awesome. So, that's kind of cool. And then there was another article just about robot zombies in this, and there were several people that covered this. And, I'm not sure why people were so shocked. It's Zack Snyder. Of course there's going to be robot zombies.
Is this confirmed?
I don't know. It's I tried to find a little bit more on it.
Without giving away too much, if you pay close attention, there are a number of zombies that are clearly not zombies. That's a quote from Snyder.
Yes.
Oh, wait. You see some normal zombies, then you see some robot zombies. What?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, he's asking. He's like, are those monitors that the government has placed there? What? Okay. All right. You know what, Zach? You lead. I will follow. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, he says that they are either, spies for the government or robots from another world. And the whole premise of this particular zombie apocalypse is that these are from outer space. And he also uses that premise to explain why some of these are sentient slash
Hmm.
alpha zombies. So stay tuned. We'll see what comes of this. I don't know. This is becoming more and more like, is this real or is this a figment of Zack Snyder's imagination or dreamscape? Who knows?
Well,
We shall
we'll
see.
see.
And then last up, which I will admit, when I was reading through this article and watching this scene, it just made me want to watch 28 Days Later again.
Right.
But I also don't know if necessarily this is the best, scariest scene. I think there's lots of scary
That's
scenes in 28 Days Later. So,
That's the question. So this article it's from Slash Film, and it's 28 days later delivered one of the most stressful scenes in modern horror. And then the case is made by Megan Navarro, the author, that scene is when they drive through the tunnel in the cab and get a flat tire and have to change the tire, and then the zombies start coming, and it's really scary. And I will admit that driving into a dark tunnel in a apocalyptic world where you know that zombies like the dark, it doesn't, I mean, it seems like a terrible idea and very scary. And I feel like this has been toyed with in fiction, at least about New York too, like going through tunnels to get out of a post-apocalyptic Manhattan if the bridges are out or something is also
mhm.
has also been toyed with as a very scary concept. And I think it does, it just like it tugs on some pretty basic survival strings, doesn't it? Like dark, scary place, potentially full of zombies, bad and scary. But is it the most scary scene in 28 Days Later? And what do you think would be some other contenders, HA?
So when, they mention a scariest scene, and maybe it's not as scary as, I mean, I really feel like the reveal when Killian Murphy's character is sort of wandering through deserted London
Hmm.
and first discovers them is pretty like
In the
terrifying.
church, yeah.
Yeah, I also think that the
When he's like looking at pictures of his parents in the kitchen
yep,
of his childhood home, and
yep,
they crash through the windows.
that's pretty crazy. But one which also really stands out to me is when the dad of the father daughter
Hmm.
team, the drop lands in his eye. I think that is to me, one of the scariest because the characters. But if you're talking about stressful, I mean, this one definitely is in there.
Yeah.
Without question for me, but I do think that the genius of this film is that there's so many of them that just sort of like play upon your worst nightmares.
I also feel like the stressful scene was one of them was when they had to climb over those
Yes.
shopping carts to go and then go up the stairs, and then he has like a sugar crash,
Yep.
and he's like slowing down. We know that there's a bunch of like very energetic zombies coming up, or rage
Right.
monsters coming up the stairs behind them, and I thought that was pretty stressful.
Right, and I feel like they do such a great job with this film at sort of, and they talk about it in this article, and I think that's right. Building the tension and stress and terror, and then basically allowing sort of a moment of grace, and then it comes back again. Like, so there's the whole crazy thing where they're going up that particular scene, and you think that they're done for because it's just like kind of weird, like they're all coming up the shopping carts and whatever. And
Hmm.
then there's the fantastic scene where you see the person in like riot gear, basically, and
Yeah.
they're safe, and it's sort of like, oh my gosh. And similarly here, when they manage to get out of that tunnel despite a lot of you know they seem to be done for, and yet they manage to get out of there, and there's just like, so they do a great job at playing upon those emotions in terms of the audience.
And Megan
But
does do a good job in this article of writing about the sound quality, like the way that the scene is set up, where you have the wave of rats that's like, oh my God, what's that? And then it's quiet for a second, and then there's like this growing crescendo of approaching anger zombies, and that is actually like a really effective way to to make it extremely stressful and scary too. So I mean I think she's onto something. It's a great scene, but the movie. I mean, we talked about it for what, 2.5 hours on this podcast originally?
We did. And quick note, it's Tig Notaro, not Novaro. I was looking at the last name of this author and mixed them up because that's what happens when I don't have my notes right in front of me when reading it. So
Yeah, Tig Notaro.
Notaro. But no, I thought she did a great job in terms of laying out the argument for this, and I definitely think it's correct because this is, in terms of feeling as if there's no way out, and I think also part of it is the visual playing that they do here, where it's like you don't know necessarily what's up ahead of them, and there's so much going on, and we've seen in other parts of the city how various exits of escape have been basically blocked or thwarted. And so even the fact, I mean, I think that there's definitely a feeling, even the fact, like when they're going into the tunnel, you're like, I don't know that that's such a great idea without knowing what's on the other side of it. So I think that definitely this is in the running, but again, we talked more. Remember when we did the review of this film, we almost talked like double the length of the film because we loved it so much. So I'm not for this podcast, but I may have to go back and watch this again because it's so good. So
Totes.
Miss it. Things that I don't want to watch again, though, are episode 10 of Fear the Walking Dead, Handle with Care. And I will say, despite my teasing it earlier, I think it was slightly better than the last episode, but I think what I'm really feeling based upon the last episode and this episode is that things seem to have gone off the rails or somehow there's something we missed. That's my feeling, or maybe because of the COVID restraints, they were planning to do certain things and couldn't show them. It just feels like there's a lot of missing pieces here to me anyway, and the narration and the storytelling has fallen down, which is super disappointing. To me anyway, like I really enjoyed, and again, maybe I'm just having like sour grapes over John Dory leaving the show. But
that could be part of it.
But
I agree with you. There's something that feels off. And I think the Occam's razor approach is it's probably COVID, frankly. Like something feels cheap and fake and bad about a lot of the production to me now. There's actually a scene in this episode of some really janky CGI zombies, which I don't know that this show has ever done outside of look, there's a herd of zombies 20 miles away, and they'll just like paint that onto the background, and it usually looks like crap. They very rarely resort to CGI zombies that you can see their limbs moving, and these are bad.
They're pretty bad.
I rewound and I looked at it again. I was like, oh my God, they did it. God damn them all. They actually did it. They blew it all up. So I do think that some of my beef is probably attributable to COVID, and that should make me be nicer to this show. However, I'm with you. I think that there were elements of this episode that I thought were kick-ass and that I really enjoyed. And I was trying, by the time I got to the end, because at the beginning I kind of hated it. By the time I got to the end, I was like, all right, cup half full, I think. Let's try. I'm just trying to like mentally be a little more positive about it, just because of it's an uphill battle, right, for this show, for production in general. It is,
and so to be positive, I love Ruben Blades, and I love the character of Daniel Salazar. I think he's interesting. Well, I think that he did an incredible job in this episode, and I also think that the storyline or the idea that they're going for here is also very interesting.
Considering the head wounds that he's been sustaining over
it makes sense. Yeah.
And honestly, I was hoping that they would be like, so we brought it up when he got hammered again and had that massive head wound at the end of during last episode. I was like, how are they going to keep doing this to this old dude?
I know. And so I liked that idea of this episode. And again, if you haven't seen this yet, we get to watch it a little early. So just hold off on listening to this if you haven't seen it yet. So we're going to totally go into some spoilers here. But the main idea behind this episode is that he is basically we see things from his perspective for the most part, and he is not seeing that, like, he is suffering from some memory and perhaps PTSD and other issues.
Do you
And
do you like the trope of the unreliable narrator? Because I find it frustrating.
I find it frustrating because then you start questioning pretty much every piece of narration, and so I would have preferred that they were showing you a little bit more of this instead of trying to make it a dun 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 big reveal.
Yeah.
I do like the idea that he is really shocked when he realizes what's been happening. Like,
Yeah.
he can't even trust himself. So I think that was kind of cool.
That payoff is good, but it's also like two-thirds of the way
Long.
through the episode. And you're
Right.
like, oh man, this has been really kind of, because to get there, you have to sit through all of this, also the bickering, and they're not doing Sherry's character any
Nope.
favors, right? She
It's
is
not.
really a pain in the ass to listen to.
It's not just her.
I know it's everybody,
it's her,
really.
it's all of them. And again, it's this, and it we felt the same way. And again, I think you're right. I think this is probably COVID related and in how they have to film things. And maybe it has to do with how much rehearsal time they get, because normally they would maybe get more. But my feeling both for the last episode and this episode, which I did not feel with the John Dory offing episode, that it's very forced and feels contrived and doesn't feel like people are connecting. And it's not, I don't think it's just the writing. I do think it's a little bit of that, but I think it feels like maybe they don't have enough time to sort of get comfortable with what they're doing, and maybe it's just how the direction is. For all I know, they only had, maybe there's a very limited amount of time that they can be together in said group on set. I don't know, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what it feels like to me. So it really feels like they're kind of trying to force, like, it's this. And the thing that I was trying to put my finger on what feels so disjointed about it, and it feels as if the audience is expected to understand immediately what all these sort of factions are, like, that there's some unknown element here that we have missed.
Yeah, because at the end, when the dude Shambliss is describing what they were going for, he's like, yeah, so all these people wanted different outcomes. I'm like, what different outcomes did they want? They all
Right.
just wanted to kill Virginia, like, except for Morgan.
Right. And so, and, I think that maybe an exploration of what they wanted would make a little more sense rather than just kill Virginia. And so that would have helped a little bit in terms of figuring out what was happening here.
Yeah,
But
because
secondly,
Strand just wanted to solidify power, I assume. The babyface mask people literally just wanted to kill Virginia.
right.
They
There
never
isn't,
actually built them out to be anything other than vigilante raiders or whatever, you know?
right. And I think what you end up with, though, is sort of a poor man's Walking Dead community setup, right? Like, like the kind of B team.
Yeah.
So you got the babyface people, then the old Lawson people, and now Morgan's team. And I don't think that you have solidified what is different about these communities. And maybe that's part of the point, is that there really isn't that much difference, honestly. And I also have to say, like, one of the things you and I talked about is how this little community that Morgan is creating, and somehow it's safer than other things. Well, clearly it's not, and we see this in this episode that it's not, and they act as if this is somehow this fortress that is really safe, and it seems even more vulnerable than other things because by the way, for them to all get stuck there and suddenly feel helpless because they don't have guns, doesn't that seem kind of strange to you?
Oh God, the setup with the guns, though, man. This is part of what makes this episode super frustrating early
Yeah.
on. In addition to them bickering about seemingly nothing, and I want to get into more detail about some of the things that they were bickering about,
Right.
because even though it was a pain in the ass, it's noteworthy. But they do the thing that's like so Bush League and rookie move, and like Walking Dead season 4 or 5, like 5 years ago, for the audience in terms of where we are in our heads. They take everybody's guns and they lock them up in one shack, and it's like, no, dude, this is not modern day zombie survival behavior. And I don't care how much you don't trust these people. Part of the not trusting everybody means that everybody should have a gun, in my opinion, right?
Right.
Not locking them all up where they could be, a target for some sort of shenanigans, which may or may not have happened.
Right. And like, again, these are all people that have worked together. I don't know that locking the guns up makes any sense. But secondly, let's also talk about how guns aren't necessarily the best option anyway, because
Right.
they draw more walkers in. So it's sort
Where are
of
your hand weapons? I
right.
mean, they do actually take Strand's knife when they're checking him in, and I assume that they took everybody else's knives. But come on, it's The Walking Dead.
It's The Walking Dead, and also this community is supposed to be surviving. So one would imagine that even if these things were locked up, there would be access to other hand weapons because this group has been dealing with this all along. So I found that I was so frustrated by that storyline. It's like, okay, now we're going to use a chair because there really is nothing else available. Like, really? Like, it just
And
felt.
a saw.
I
So that
mean,
was really bad.
it it just seemed totally comical. And then we're also relying on like stupid vehicle that we know doesn't again causes
They
so
try
much.
to they try to describe like because who is it? It's like, oh, Sarah's like, hey, can we borrow that? And then Sherry's like, nah, if we let you use it, everybody has to use it, and we're running on fumes. So they try to be like, yeah, we don't have a lot of gas, but they still have some gas. Tanktown blew up who knows how long ago.
Right.
Where
It's
are they getting this gas from? It's very unlikely that
and
thing is
yet
still running
they give it to Morgan and the rabbi, and
right away.
they say that there's enough gas in it for them to get like the whole thing sounds a little weird. So that's
It's so
strange.
convenient and yet kind of flies in the face of what Sherry was just telling Sarah. Like, why include that piece of dialogue if you're then going to turn around and be like,
Right.
oh, but you have to run an errand? Yeah, cool. Go for it, man. No big deal.
Right. So, I mean, my biggest issue is that we don't, they have these conflicting kind of ideas. And then the other part is when they're all sitting around the table, like the big thing that they're trying to figure out is who these graffiti artists are and who are these interlopers trying to somehow sabotage all these communities and what do they want. And, you know, the idea that maybe there is some kind of weird underground like faction or something like that, okay, sure, we can deal with that. But even the discussion about what they know about them, nobody talks about any useful information. And then they look to Dakota to somehow fill in the blanks. Like, why on earth would Dakota know anything since her sister slash mother didn't share anything with her?
Well, it turns
Like,
out she does have some information at the very end of the episode.
sort
But
of, but
that
not.
conversation is super frustrating because as soon as they're like, Dakota, tell us what you know. And then they're like, this chick, I don't trust her. And then Wes says something like, Morgan said this place would be different. All we have to do is try a little. He doesn't even get to finish his one line of the episode before Sherry interrupts and goes, this guy, weren't you the one that Ginny thought blew up Tanktown? And I'm like, all right, the people who write for Sherry, please take note. She hated Virginia. Why would she give a crap who Virginia thought was a culprit? If anything, you should be hugging Wes because enemy of my enemy is my friend. I mean, this is like basic writing stuff. Why would you be like, Sherry thinks that Wes is a bad guy because Virginia thought Wes was a bad guy? That makes zero sense.
Yeah. The whole thing is very
And that's just one salvo. It goes back and forth and around the table. And Sarah's even throwing shade at Charlie during this episode. Like, weren't you fighting for the vultures at one point? And it's like, dude, come on, get with it now. That was a long time ago. Alexa Nisensen is like grown 3 feet taller since that season. So let's all just kind of move forward.
Yeah, and so again, there's like this weird disjointed storytelling here, and the other part is that about this whole idea that somehow Dakota knows a little bit more. The person who would probably know more is Strand. If
Yeah, he was in her inner circle.
more so than anybody else, and clearly she was shocked by his betrayal.
And
The
she hired him, in quotes, to fight the baddies. So why wasn't she sharing intel with him about the baddies?
Right. So that felt kind of
That's a good point.
odd, that you would be looking to Dakota, and obviously it's just like kind of a way to keep her in, I guess, into the group. I don't know, like to have her adding something so we don't just have her disappear. And so there's that stuff going on. Things
We
I
also have this explosion that Daniel explains away as a rock fell on our dynamite. And it's a little convenient and also terrible.
It's terrible, but I mean, the things I like about this is that with, the sort of mystery about Daniel that we find out later, it's like who would have done this, and the idea that there's somebody in there acting against everybody's interests, that there's
Oh, that's
somehow
Luciana is the one who plants that seed. She's like, yeah, we thought it was an accident at first too. It's so
yeah.
much of this. Everyone's a suspect. BS. That
Yeah,
only it
and
just it
you
gets out of
don't.
control.
It does get out of control. The other thing I will note here is that they're still wasting Luciana. Why not have her take more of an active role? She's such a badass. Like it just feels like they are totally wasting her as a character, which I just maybe they'll redeem themselves later. But I just find it frustrating because I like her a lot. And
Yeah. Potential silver lining is that
her
she and Wes are going out on a mission at the end of this
is
episode.
it
So
is that guy's
hopefully,
is that guy's name Wes? I don't remember.
yeah,
Are we sure? I don't know.
I am not 100%, but I'm looking at the cast list and nope. Wes. Is he in the cast?
Is it Hector? No, am I
No,
crazy?
it's Colby Holman as Wes.
Oh, okay, cool.
He just has had so few lines since his introduction, and it's not like that weird that they've done this because all those children have disappeared off the show.
Oh, and did you catch in the last episode they were like, "Oh, bring the others out." She's like, "No, just these," and it just was like a very convenient version, like a way to not show the rest of the cast. But yeah, no, I mean, so I do like the idea that there is something weird going on and that you can't trust people, and that's fine. But I think we need to know a little bit more about what is motivating this underground group of people.
Well, by the end of this episode, kind of like the carpet, the rug that gets pulled out from under you is that they weren't even involved at all. Probably.
Right, probably. It's just perhaps Mr. Salazar dealing with some PTSD because he's relating this building of the community to somehow his daughter or something like that. They don't do a great job at connecting that, but they kind
Because
of
it's
try
not well
to.
connected. Because Shambliss and Goldberg had never made any effort to draw connections
Right.
between seasons 1 through 3,
Correct.
and since they took over. And another point of that is when Shambliss is doing his little explication at the end, he's like, so this music has always been really central to Daniel's stories, and then he, ellipsis, and then he goes, in the last couple of seasons. I'm like, yeah, because you guys made that up as
Right.
soon as you got him back on the show, because I think he took a whole year off after
Yeah,
they
he
became
did.
showrunners.
He did.
And so they were like, yeah, it's music. He's an assassin who loves a little bit of
Traveling wheelberries.
light folk rock.
And the cat. Don't forget the
The
cat.
cat shows up too, but then he's not in the exit scene. So I
No,
don't know what happened
and
to
actually,
Skidmark.
that's all I could think of was
Me
where's
too. I'm like,
Skidmark?
where is Skidmark? Which one of those bags is he in?
Is he in one of the bags? I don't know. It's not moving. But and I do think that one of the better scenes in this, and the better the reveal where basically they go and find Grace. She's not at the shack, and the good piece of this is that we do see the two conversations where he supposedly tells them to go to the fishing shack, but apparently in real life he told them to go to the caverns. That reveal where he can't even trust himself, and they show him the map, the damning evidence that he can't even trust himself. That was kind of cool, but it
I
was
still thought somebody was setting him up at that point. I wasn't convinced that he had lost his mind because I don't like being lied to by the camera.
And it upset, that part upset me too. And I was just like, I wish we had seen something to somehow, I don't mind him not trusting himself, but I don't want to this seemed a little far fetched. And also, why the heck wasn't Grace answering the radio?
Right.
Okay, and I know they were doing that to build tension, but given what was going on and what was happening in the settlement, you would have thought that, especially if Morgan was calling her, she would have picked up.
Also, another point of extreme frustration, they lose contact with Morgan on the walkies, and
Right.
the walkies are still such a major part of
Yeah,
this.
it's a problem.
Because the zombies apparently stormed the wall and broke the antenna. And I'm like, why did you put the antenna 3 feet off the ground outside the wall? What kind of morons are running this encampment?
And again, let's talk about how easily breached this little settlement is. It didn't take much. And when you see the things that they have set up in terms of oh, that wasn't made to take this much weight. Oh, wait, how did they get through? And it's like, okay, you're looking at this settlement as something that's supposed to be better and more easily defended than these other places, and it took literally like a few walkers to
Yeah.
get through. And then in addition to this, even the beginning part where they see that the walkers have been attracted to the settlement because of the dynamite explosion, there aren't that many. There's enough seasoned fighters within this settlement to go and take care of business, basically.
You say that, but then when Daniel let those 3 or 4 in to just find out, who's the mole, you hear somebody yelling off camera like, we got walkers over here. There's 3 of them. Ah, it's too many.
Right.
And I'm like, I mean, yeah, I get it. Nobody has weapons because you guys are idiots, but it's not too many, and you'll make do. Like, there are probably some rocks lying around. We saw a whole scene where Strand was just killing zombies with a brick a couple seasons ago. I don't think that we need to regress our zombie survivors to the point that they can't take care of themselves.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not sure where they're going to go with this. Obviously, they're making out these little interlopers to be the big bad, but at least in this case, Daniel is, we've discovered that his memory is faulty, and they have discovered it too. And I do think it's kind of interesting that he's like, oh, I can't trust myself, and I don't want to put the people that I care about in danger. And the interesting thing that I thought was kind of odd, and I don't like, we have a whole confrontation between him and Strand where he's convinced that Strand is the person that has been causing all of this. And not totally, like, you can kind of understand why Daniel believes this, because he's had multiple instances where Strand has let him down and betrayed the group. And even up until, like, he ultimately, was on their side with Virginia, but the rest of the group didn't know that.
I agree. And Strand and Daniel do have some
History.
dialogue about this, but their history, I think, goes back further than the dialogue.
Yeah.
Because, again, I don't think these showrunners are like good enough at.
No,
and
they're
Daniel
not.
talks a lot about his ancient history, right? Like going to the barbershop in LA and all of these connections. And I was grateful for that. And he even does a callback to season 2 at the end of this episode when he's like, the last time this happened, I burned the whole place down. And that was talking about the winery, and he went off the show for a few months.
Right.
But the scene where he and Strand are talking about their differences, Strand's like, you were lying to me for weeks or months or whenever he was pretending to be an amnesiac. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys also have beef going back to season 3 or 2, whenever Strand lied to Daniel saying he knew where Ophelia was so that Daniel would let him into the dam or give him a ride, or I forget what exactly was going on. But then that was when Daniel first decided that Strand was no good.
Right.
Also, Strand did shoot him in the face, and I'm glad that they actually addressed that in this episode too. And that was one of the most kick-ass parts of the episode me, was when Ruben Blades, Daniel Salazar, takes that, I don't know where he found this plastic piece, like, that just perfectly molds his face. But that was a really good reveal and a great little monologue from Daniel Salazar, I thought.
Right. And they also tie it into, he's only able to eat soup, like he's in pain all the time. Basically, he's dealing with like a lot of after effects, that unseen, like basically a silent disability, basically, and that he's been suffering through this entire time. And, he, with good cause, blames Strand for this, and so he's basically like, yeah, and I'm gonna shoot you in the face now too.
The show hasn't done a great job of showing persistent injuries too. I mean, I think the comic book did a better job of that with cutting off Rick Grimes's hand fairly early on in the run of the comic. You had Carl's eye get shot out and stuff, but
even Dwight's, like, I noticed it in this episode, and sometimes maybe it's just how long he's in front of them in the makeup chair, and maybe they don't do it as intensely when he's not going to be.
Oh, you mean his scar?
But his scar is like sometimes it looks more intense than others, and it really depends on how much camera time he's going to get, I think. But
you think about how often these actors or these characters have been shot. A lot of them too. Like almost all of them, I feel like, have been shot. I mean, Luciana's been pinioned by a
I
freaking
know.
piece of rebar on an airplane, and she's
Right.
wandering around fine, no nerve damage.
Right.
But I feel like most of them would have limps and be like
Something.
have bum hands and all kinds of weird stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that they did at least a little nod to this.
I'm glad that they did a nod to this, but then, there's an interesting thing, and I was really struck by it. But, and this is, to me, again, it's just a very different way of running shows. But Andrew Chambliss is talking about how Victor is excited to get Daniel in a prison cell, and I didn't read
Yeah,
it that way.
I guess we were supposed to,
I
which
think we were supposed to, but I didn't
only
read.
hurts his argument.
But it didn't feel that way to me. I'm not saying that Strand is like totally redeemed. I think he's always going to have some self-serving thing, but I do think that he was offering this more as a kindness versus having Daniel out there wandering on his own. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe if this is how the showrunners are seeing it, maybe we'll see like Daniel in a weird cell being tortured, on a psychological basis by Strand, but it honestly did not come across that way to me, in
Hey,
how these two,
if that's the case, maybe this is Ruben Blades' exit strategy to get off the show, like we were talking about
maybe.
after Garrett Dillahunt. Maybe Ruben Blades is like, look, I signed on to be a murderous hitman from Panama, and you've made me like this happy-go-lucky traveling Wilburys groupie. So adios.
Yeah. So in any way, I did not find this satisfying at all. I love this actor. I actually really loved his interactions with Strand. I think these two actors are fantastic, and honestly, the interactions between him and Morgan when they're figuring out what's happening,
Beautiful scene.
that was really a fantastic scene, and it just makes me more regretful of the fact that that everything else couldn't tie together in a better way, and that it felt like just superficial and strange. And I hope that it does come back, but I don't really have a lot of faith that it will.
I wonder if you could have had the same payoff in that scene between Morgan and Daniel if you hadn't had the whole unreliable narrator, or if you could have had if you could have had a reliable telling of the story showing Daniel being inconsistent, and if it wouldn't have still had the same weight when they had that scene between Morgan and Daniel. You know what I mean? Like if we had actually watched him say, "Go to the cavern, stay away from the shack," and then later he's confusedly asking Grace why she didn't go to the shack, I feel like it could have still worked. No, or
Yeah,
am I being too
no,
naive about?
I think that it could have. I think that especially when people are going through memory issues and things like that, there's this whole like realization that they can't trust themselves, and a fear and an anger that happens. And I do think that Ruben Blades portrays this very well, but also he has been a trusted member by just about everybody here, and in fact there's a reason why the settlement was even kept secret and built, is because of his shenanigans that he was playing within the Lawson community and pretending, and gathering info on the sly, and pretending to be damaged, and just having that damaged memory actually come true. I think you could have done it and still had these moments. And I just think it's kind of a heartbreaking realization, both on his part but also on Morgan's part, that this has been happening, because it's also
Yeah,
that fear. And
you can't leave him as your second in command when you go off on a mission anymore. That's for sure.
right, right. And then of course they bring in June to sort of evaluate him.
She's like,
And
so I don't know anything about psychology. I'm gonna go read a book
I
and I'll
know,
let you
right?
know what I find out. I'm like, okay, why don't we just bring in the rabbi at this point? I feel like you figured it out. It's not neurological.
Then
It's
yeah,
time for the rabbi, because he's
correct.
probably got a way more counseling experience than you, June.
And also, I love that actor, and I'd like to see him in more. And
Yes.
they've just been having him kind of like, oh, there he is in the distance. I don't know, maybe he has like a different filming schedule or has other things he's doing, but like I miss him. I think
Oh,
he was a great ad, and they don't, again, another
yep.
character that I think that they're wasting. But that could add a lot of like interesting layers to this particular story. But in any case,
My wish list for the rest of the season, and there's only actually 13 episodes this season, which is kind of crazy.
yeah.
My wish list is that so Wes and Lucy are going to go have an adventure. I think the rabbi should join them. They'll find the kids. They'll start a new community. It'll just be some solid. And then I think Lucy should either become a way more used member of the cast, or she should get killed. And
Yeah, like
same,
I just,
yeah.
for me, it's like, why can't she be one of the leaders? Why are all the leaders men? Because certainly Sherry isn't being put into this position. And always it's like I know that they were trying to do that with Virginia, but Lucy was running like this entire settlement before. And that's probably one of my big issues is that she's more than capable of doing super cool things. And in fact, she was doing that successfully for a pretty long time, or at least, like kind of keeping things going. And I just feel like they're missing an opportunity here, and could be telling better stories if they are utilizing her more. Same thing with June, I guess. It feels like they're wasting some kind of cool characters that they put in the time to build a little bit. So let's and also I just love her as a character in general. So but anyway, like I digress. So anything more to add
I
about
guess the
this?
one other bright spot is that when the episode started with Daniel doing an interview, I was really concerned that it was going to be an Al videography interview,
I
and it
was
turned out not to
too.
be.
And I was really happy about that. That was good that it was not. And I did like the reveal where at first, because they do show him having these confrontations with Strand, that you understand that he's in the jail, but you don't
Yeah.
understand on which side of the bars he is. And I thought that was kind of a cool reveal. I think you could kind of assume that was going to happen based upon how he's telling the narration, and oh, big surprise, he's implying that something bad has happened during that day. I mean, that's pretty much they're laying the foundation about that from the get-go. But I thought that was a nice bit of photo or video editing, and I think he's a fantastic actor, but wouldn't be shocked if this is a bit of his long goodbye, based upon how they're setting things up.
It does feel,
So
yeah, it feels a little bit that way. So I think that's Handled with Care, which was directed by Heather Cappiello and written by Ashley Cardiff and David Johnson. I don't know if this is David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick or a different David Johnson, but interesting. Next week is The Holding,
yep.
which is written by Channing Powell, a regular on the show. And then there's another one called In Dreams, and then there's the final is JD, and that's directed by Aisha Tyler.
So that could be interesting.
I don't know that she's directed an episode of the show before. I don't know that I've seen her direct much TV. Honestly, I think she's a hilarious comedian and a great voice of wisdom and humor. But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think that's all I've got for Handle with Care. It's like I said, it was a mixed bag. I started off feeling very salty about it, and then by the end, they threw in enough references to earlier seasons before they ruined Fear the Walking Dead, and Daniel Salazar to an extent, that I was okay with it. I wasn't going to rage out, but I do think that there's still a weird quality to this production right now. I'm trying to be as forgiving as I can, and we'll see how the next 3 episodes of the season go.
Yeah. So let's see what happens. I'll cross my fingers to hope that the storytelling gets a little less muddied, and maybe they will surprise me. Maybe these were just a couple of one-offs, and I am curious to see what other people think about it. So if you have thoughts, send us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us, reanimatedpcast, or you can leave a note on our site, reanimatedpodcast.com. Did I do that right?
Indeed, you did.
Woohoo.
As an aside, I managed to find Squarespace's secret hidden settings to allow 300 episodes of our podcast to be shown in podcatchers and podcast feeds now. So instead of having to go through the archive, you can actually probably pull them up on your podcast player of choice and on iTunes and places like that, which is great for folks who want to dig back through the old stuff and maybe listen to our 28 Days Later review from, what was that, 2014? A long ass time ago.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah.
Time flies. Time flies. Who knew? Who knew that we would be casting during a pandemic?
Who could have possibly foreseen?
Well, anyway, I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and let us know your thoughts, and we will see you next time. Ciao.
All right. Thank you. And bye-bye.